بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. So before I begin, I'd like to apologize for this delay. There were a number of issues, but we had a few technical problems, alhamdulillah, which are hopefully fixed, and hopefully this class goes uninterrupted. Okay, so with regards to the ahadith that relate to the topic of tonight, even though I have read them in the previous class, maybe even in the previous two classes. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah to everyone who's saying salam. However, I haven't put the ahadith in the presentation. If someone needs them, either if I could trouble one of the brothers or the sisters to look them up and put it in the chat box, or they could just refer back to the previous class, inshallah. I'm just going to point to a specific hadith tonight, inshallah. Other than that, I think we're good to go. Given, by the way, that we have started this class a little bit later than the schedule, inshallah, we'll end in about 40 minutes time, just so we don't take the time of the other classes. So with this, I think we're good to go. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-Tahirin. So we spoke in the previous two classes about what you're supposed to do with Khums. We spoke about the spoils of war and the minerals, and we talked at length about the rulings that apply to each one. And inshallah, tonight we'll be talking about treasure, as well as precious minerals that are extracted from the sea through diving. With regards to treasure, one, okay, so I don't know how to work this system, but I'll read the ahadith that I read. I read some of them in the previous session. Number one, سمعت أبا عبد الله عليه السلام يقول فيما يخرج من المعادن أو يخرج, what is extracted of the minerals, والبحر والغنيمة والحلال المختلط بالحرام إذا لم يعرف صاحبه والكنوز الخمس. أو سمعت أبا عبد الله يقول فيما يخرج من المعادن والبحر والغنيمة والحلال المختلط بالحرام إذا لم يعرف صاحبه والكنوز الخمس. So the Imam says that Khums applies, and I'll just go back to the main camera. Khums applies to what is extracted, the minerals, that are extracted, as well as the things that are extracted from the sea, and the spoils of war, and the halal that is mixed with haram, and treasures. The Imam says Khums applies to all of these. Again, so these are general hadith that apply to these different categories. The other hadith says, okay, so the other hadith, I don't have it on the system, and I did not mention it in the last class. I have it on my laptop. Okay. So, another hadith. قال روى محمد بن أبي عمير محمد بن أبي عمير. Now, it looks like this hadith, Muhammad ibn Umayr, ibn Abi Umayr, excuse me, is narrating this hadith from an imam. Or even if he is not, um, if he's not narrating the hadith, then it is what he has understood from the ahadith that khums applies to al-kunuz, so treasures, wal-ghaws. So he mentions four things: al-kunuz wal-ma'adin wal-ghaws wal-ghanima. Treasures and minerals, as well as things that are extracted from the sea through diving. Now, the word Arabic ghaws means diving, but what they actually mean is that is the things that are extracted through diving. Wal ghanima, and the spoils of war. Another hadith says, قال الخمس من خمسة أشياء من الغنائم والغوص ومن الكنوز ومن المعادن والملاحة. Again, the Imam here mentions clearly diving and treasures. Really, I don't think we need any more hadith to prove this, to prove that khums applies to the things that are extracted from the sea through diving, and that khums applies to treasures. Now, going back to the okay, same mistake. So I've just put this list again here for reference if anyone needs it. Now, I've also gotten the admin to put the presentation PDF on the WhatsApp channel. However, if someone needs this, they could take a screenshot. These are the 7 mawarid is what they say, the 7 things that khums applies to. Now, looking at each specific one, the treasures and things that are extracted from the sea. So, khums also applies to, now also is because we talked about the previous ones. Khums also applies to valuables, whether their value is because of its inherent value. I should have put this as because they are inherently valuable. Forgive me, this was a little bit last minute. So whether their value is because of its inherent value or because of its age. So treasure, whether you find gold or you find an old ramekin that goes back to the Qing dynasty, which is now worth millions of dollars, it doesn't matter. This is now counted as treasure. And so if you find these things, and whether you find them inside a wall, under the ground, in a tree, wherever you find these things, it is considered as treasure. So treasure isn't only found in the ground, it's not only found in the wall. Anywhere you find treasure, it's called treasure. And so the rulings that apply to treasure apply to these things. Now, given that they are found after being concealed and found in the ground or in walls or other places, so it needs to have had been concealed before so. So first it's concealed, then found. Now, how it was concealed, it doesn't matter whether it was intentional or because of natural causes, like, for example, fossils. So it doesn't matter how the process of concealment, is that a word? I don't know. Takes its way, but if it was concealed and then found, then this is called treasure. Now, Ayatollah Sistani says this. It sounds good. I don't know if if the other scholars have also said this as well. He says, however, its location must be one that is unlikely to be found in. In other words, if you go to a bank and you use these heavy duty drills and you get into the vault, you can't consider the money that you find in the bank as treasure. This is not treasure because you knew very well that if you drill into the wall of a bank, into the vault, excuse me, of the bank, that you'll find gold and money and whatnot. And so this is not considered as treasure. Now, it could be categorized in one of the different different sources of money that khums applies to, but this is not considered treasure. And inshallah, we'll talk about that later on. So again, whether its burial was intentional or a natural occurrence, this is called treasure. Now, if the treasure is found in a bought property, so you bought a house or a plot of land 5 years ago, then you suddenly think, you know what, I'm going to build a treehouse. And so you dig the ground and you find something that is, quite rough, and you can't get the shovel in. And you find that there's a crate, you take it out, turns out to be full of gold. Firstly, you're a very lucky person. Secondly, it's arguable whether or not you're a lucky person, because it depends on the next ruling. In this case, you'll need to refer back to the previous owner. If you go out and you look for the previous owner, you can't find them, and then you can't find, or you don't know whether there was an owner before the previous owner, so the person that you bought the property from, in this case, you take ownership. But if you get to the previous owner, he's just your next door neighbor, you go to him and you say, have you lost anything recently in the past 7 or 8 years? A wooden crate that has the label treasure in the ground. If they were able to identify, if they were able to prove to you that that is in fact their treasure, then you're gonna hand it back to the previous owner. However, if he starts saying these general statements, yeah, sure, I think that I may have misplaced my millions of dollars, and that it's absolute BS. In this case, you get to keep ownership, or before you take ownership, you're gonna have to refer back to the previous owner. And if the previous owner couldn't prove it's theirs, then you're gonna have to look for the owner before them. If you can't find them, then you take ownership. So just reading this paragraph because it's more simple. If the treasure is found in a bought property, the buyer is obliged to tell the previous owners or owner if the previous owner is able to identify it. Now, by the way, if the previous owner is now dead, however you know his children, well, you go back to the children, because if you know that this treasure belongs to the previous owner who is now dead, you'll need to give it back to his children that inherit his estate or her estate. If the previous owner is able to identify it, then he or she takes ownership of the treasure. But if he wasn't able to identify the treasure, then the new owner refers back to the owner before the seller. So you go back 2 owners. if he slash she wasn't able to uh, identify them, okay, there's a spelling error here, or just an issue here with the wording, or they weren't known, then the current owner gets to keep the treasure. This ruling also applies to valuables, again, another spelling error, found in animals. You go to the fish market, you buy a fish, and you open it up, and you find this, this beautiful big pearl. Before you give it as a gift to your wife, you're gonna have to take it back to the owner of the fish shop. However, some scholars have said that that this is now in your ownership, but the most popular ruling is that you're gonna have to take it back to the previous owner, or the fisherman. Again, and if you bought, I don't know, a cow, and you open that poor thing up, and you find some gold in there, and this the same thing applies. If that cow is yours, you've inherited that cow from your father, the gold inside is yours. And it's the same thing for fish. If you were the one who was fishing, and you found a fish, you opened it up, and there was a pearl inside its stomach, it's yours to keep. Now, 3 preconditions. Number 1, it must either have no owner, so the treasure that you take ownership of either has no owner, or the owner is one that isn't respected in Islam. So, number 1 is obvious. It's a no-brainer. The second part, people who are not respected in Islam are, for example, animals. If someone dies and they don't have any children, and they've put in their will that they want all of their estate to go to their dog, this dog cannot own anything. And if you were to pass the dog, and the dog was wearing this thick gold chain, you can take that chain. I'm not condoning that you do anything illegal. If this is illegal in your country, don't do it. Or a nasibi, or someone who is an enemy of Islam. For example, let's think, in the wars of Amir al-Mu'mineen, you go to a nasibi's land. He has a farm, and you dig it up, you find treasure. That treasure is for you to take, because the owner is not respected, an enemy. And the same thing applies to a nasibi. Number 2, its value, sorry, I'm missing an S here. Its value must reach the threshold. So the same thing that we said with regards to minerals also applies here. The value of the treasure needs to reach the threshold before Khums is applied to it. And Khums here is, the threshold here is, now there's a difference in opinion here. Is the threshold 487, the value of 487.2 grams of minted silver? Ayatollah Modarresi says this is based on ihtiyat. But it looks like this is ihtiyat istihbabi, so not obligatory precaution, but recommended precaution. Ayatollah Sistani, he says no, it needs to reach the value of 487.2 grams of minted silver, or the value of 69.6 grams of minted gold, whichever comes first. So if at some point in time, um, the the percentage, or the price of gold is less than the price of silver, and 69.6 grams, this is just imaginary, but if 69.6 grams of minted gold is worth less than 487.2 grams of silver, um, as soon as it reaches the value of 69.6 grams of minted gold, you're going to have to tax it. And if silver, the value of 487.2 grams of silver is less than that of gold, then you're going to have to tax it whenever it reaches the threshold that is the value of silver. I hope it makes sense. If someone's having issues understanding this, can you put something in the chat box and I could repeat it? Okay, no one's writing anything. Okay, I have to apologize to Sumbul Kadhemi for this lesson. Listen, it's okay. Firstly, this is just a fun fact. Fiqh, jurisprudence, if you study it in this context, which is reading the works of these scholars who have deduced the rulings, it's kind of boring. It's a little bit dry in nature. And that is because there's nothing to it. All you are reading are a number of bylaws. However, once you get into fiqh and you start to look at the evidence that the scholars deduce the rulings from, that's where it gets really interesting, and that's where your mind starts to do these really cool things where you criticize other scholars, not criticize scholars like the scholars themselves, but their deductions. But I know that it's like a little bit boring, but bear with me. It's quite nice. Now, no, I did not call criticizing scholars fun. Astaghfirullah. In fact, I'm someone who always calls for the respect of all scholars. All just scholars are respected, and it doesn't matter what their political opinions are. They are respected. I was talking about criticizing. Scholars criticize each other's rulings, but they respect each other. So, just to go back to what I was talking about. Let's assume that 487.2 grams of silver is worth $20. I don't know how much it's worth, but let's for the sake of this argument, let's say that this is worth $20. And the value of gold is $30. As soon as the treasure reaches the value of $20, Khums applies to it. If gold was actually cheaper than silver, if gold was $30 and silver was $50, as soon as the value of the treasure reaches $30, it needs to be taxed. So what I'm trying to say is that according to Ayatollah Sistani, whether it's gold or silver, it doesn't matter. Whichever comes first and the threshold reaches the first value, it needs to be taxed. Ayatollah Modarresi, he says no, it needs to reach the value of 69.6 grams of minted gold. However, as a matter of ihtiyat, it is good if you tax it once it reaches the value of 487.2 grams minted silver. I think this makes sense, inshallah. If it doesn't, just type it in the questions box and I could repeat it. Now, number 3, if the owner or the inheritor is known, it is an obligation to hand it over to the owner. This is a given. It's obvious. Whether Muslim or otherwise. So you buy a house in New York, and you dig the ground and you find treasure. Now, the person that you bought the house from is now deceased. You go to their children, and if you know that they are the owners of this treasure, then you give it to them. So even if they're not Muslims, you need to return their father's treasure to them because they are the legal inheritors of his estate. This is if the owner was respected. We talked about that a little bit earlier on. If there is no inheritor, so the person that you bought the house from is now dead, but they don't have any children. Ayatollah Sistani says, I don't know what Ayatollah Modarresi's opinion is because I couldn't find his opinion. Ayatollah Sistani says it is a matter of obligatory precaution to consider this as property that belongs to someone who does not have an inheritor. In this case, it goes to the Imam alayhi salam. So in this case, you cannot just pay the khums and take the ownership of the rest. The entire, all of the treasure goes to the Imam or his representative. But if it is known that the previous owner has no kins, then it has the ruling of treasure. So I may have said it differently. If you know that they don't have any inheritors, then you take ownership. But if you don't know whether they have other children or cousins or aunts and uncles, in this case, you need to give it to the Imam alayhi salam or his representative. But if you know that he has no other kins, you bought it from a World War II veteran and you're pretty sure that his grandfather is not alive, in this case, you take ownership of the treasure. Sorry that I made an error. Is that okay? Inshallah, it's okay. So, brother, okay. Now, number 4, things that are extracted from the sea through diving. Any valuables found in the water, whether at the bottom of the ocean or on the surface, such as ambergris, is subject to khums. Now, ambergris, in Arabic, it's called ambar. Really, it's quite disgusting when you know what it is. It's just sperm whale poop, I think. But apparently, it smells really good, and they used to use it to make perfumes. They still use it to make perfumes, and apparently it's really expensive as well. And that floats on the water. So whether you find that or you dive into the ocean or the sea, and you find the things that are there, this is all considered things that are extracted from the sea through diving. So even if it doesn't need any diving per se, it's still considered, it has the same ruling as the things that are extracted from the sea through diving. Now, the threshold here, khums is applicable to this. However, the threshold is quite different. The threshold is 3.48 grams of minted gold after deducing the costs of extraction. Now, 3.48 grams is 0.12 ounces. which is quite lower than the threshold of treasure and minerals. Now, Khums only applies to this if it reaches the threshold after deducing the costs of extraction. So, if you had to rent diving gear, or there were a number of you, or you paid someone to come with you, and after deducing all of these costs, the value is now less than the threshold. This does not need to be taxed, even if the original product that you extracted was worth more than, had reached the threshold. In this case, after deducing the costs, you'll need to look at it. If it now reaches the threshold, you'll need to take Khums out. If not, if it hasn't, then Khums does not apply to it. Now, and there's no difference between the types of valuables as long as the total value reaches the threshold. So it doesn't matter whether you found pearls, like a number of pearls, or one pearl and a little bit of ambergris, or whatever forms in the sea. I'm not sure. So even if there are different types, if the total of all of it reaches the threshold, it is then taxed. So it's not. It doesn't only the threshold is not for one type. It's for the total of what is found. And great rivers also have the same ruling as the sea. Finally, these rulings are exclusive to the treasures that are formed within the sea. Like, again, pearls, ambergris. I don't know. I have no idea what forms in the sea, but these are the only two that come to mind. As for the things that are lost in the sea, like shipwrecks, or even, what are they called? Let's assume. Okay, I forgot what they're called. But if you find other valuables inside the sea, and they don't naturally, form in the sea, then these are all considered as money that you gain through the year. And this is why I've written that shipwrecks have the ruling of money. So if you dive into an old ship, and you're lucky enough to find money in there, this is considered as money that you have earned throughout a year. With that, alhamdulillah, we have finished the presentation, and I'll take a few questions. I'm sorry, I only have 9 minutes. Okay. Salam Sayyid wa alaikum salam. You mentioned in your last week's class that we should make our Khums day the first day we started working or owned our first income. Yeah, so the correct thing is that Khums apply. So Khums day is the day that you receive your first paycheck. Now, if you are if you are a follower of Ayatollah Khoi, he has a different theory. He says that Khums only applies to money that you receive in your hand, so it needs to be tangible money. But that's a whole different thing. So as soon as you receive your first paycheck, according to scholars these days, Ayatollah Sistani, Ayatollah Modarresi, the day that you receive your first paycheck, that is day one of your financial year, your Islamic financial year. However, you have written in your question that I can't recall exactly when I got my job, or the date or month. Can I just start from any day and count 1 year from that day, as I can't recall when I first started working? Yes. If you do not remember when you received your paycheck, by the way, these things may have occurred a long time ago, or if you started working a long time ago. However, in this day and age, it's quite easy for you to just log into your um, internet banking and go into the statements, and you'll find when you received your first paycheck. If you aren't able to do that, then you can choose any year to make it the day that your Islamic financial year starts. According to a lot of our hadith, the month of Ramadan is the beginning of the new year, so you can make the first of Ramadan the first day, or any other day for that matter. It really doesn't matter. By the way, this I can't. Okay, someone says Salam Sayyid wa alaikum salam. My question is, I never used to pay Khums 5 years ago, and I had roughly about $8,000 in my bank account, so I wanted to start again. So I ended up giving that money away, some to my family and others as charity, and brought my balance to zero. And then from that time onwards, I started to pay Khums at the end of that year. Is it okay what I did? I know it was wrong of me to give that money away, as it was not khumsed yet. But anyway, I did and started fresh again. Hope all is okay. Okay, so the ruling is that if you, for example, bought a kilo of gold, and after a year of the date of purchase, Khums applies to this. This is subjected to Khums. You need to pay 20% of this gold bar, or if you, let's say you had 5 gold bars, you need to give one away as Khums. Now, if you take this thing and instead of paying Khums on it, you sell it, and you sell all 5, or let's say it's just one big bar and you sell it. In this case, Khums now, even though it used to apply to the physical gold bar, Khums now applies to you. So you are now indebted to the Imam by the value of that gold bar. In this case, you're going to have to pay that money because you are now indebted to the Imam. However, if you paid that money to people who deserved it, in this case, you'll need to speak to your marja and see if they allow you. Maybe you've actually paid it to people who deserve Khums money. In this case, you won't be indebted to the Imam, but you will need to speak to your marja to see if they can clear you of your debts, of your Khums. But maybe you're cleared, I'm not sure. You'll need to speak to your marja. Assalamu alaikum Sayyid. Wa alaikum salam. If you're saving to make slab-wise payments for the apartment which you have booked for residential purposes, is that amount eligible for Khums? Wa alaikum salam. I'm not sure what slab-wise payments are. There are scholars who say, and your marja could very well be one of those, who say that if you're saving money up to buy a house or an apartment to live in, and it is and this tradition is prevalent in the atmosphere in which you live, where everyone deserves a house, and normally people at your age buy a house. Um, you don't need to pay khums on the money that you're saving up for a house. But again, you're gonna have to speak to your marja about this. If one had purchased a cow randomly, without any knowledge of the gold, then can they have it for themselves? No. You'll need to check with the previous owners. If you check with the previous owner and you get them to try to identify the gold that is within the cow, for example, you go to the previous owner's house and it's run down and it looks like they've never had any treasure in this place, then it's probably not theirs. In this case, you'll need to find the previous owner, the one previous to the one who you bought the cow from. If you can't find them, you can now claim ownership of this treasure. What do you mean by Nasabi Sayyid? Can we also apply it to Nasabi in our society? Listen, with regards to taking the money, the lives of people who are not respected in Islam, we have been ordered to be extremely cautious. And this is why a lot of the scholars say that these rulings are not even applied in this day and age. A Nasibi technically is someone who openly claims to hate the Imams alayhimussalam or the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa if they claim to openly hate them, then they are Nasibi. I think this is the most popular opinion. Now, whether or not you can apply the rulings of the Nasibis in this day and age, that is up to the scholar. I know that scholars are extremely hesitant in saying yes, and other scholars openly say that these rulings are not to be they are not to be worked in this day and age. Last question, inshallah, we'll end, and I'm sorry. We have at least about 10 other questions who I don't have the time to answer. Someone says, do we have to pay khums on shells we get from the beach? Listen, if shells are definitely not considered as treasure, nor are they considered as things that are extracted, valuables that are extracted from the ocean. However, if these shells are extremely, they could be considered as minerals. I'm not sure. With these things, you'll need to look at just normal people and ask them, do you consider shells to be minerals? I know that scientifically shells are minerals, but if you talk to normal people, just ask them, are these minerals? And if they say no, they're not minerals, they're shells, and let's say that they look really nice and they may have value, khums does not apply to it as minerals or as treasure or as things that are extracted from the sea through diving, but rather khums may apply to it as money that you gain throughout the year. With that, okay, someone says treasure found in sea comes under category of treasure or extraction via sea diving. I think I pointed this out. I'm not sure if this was written earlier on. We said that the things that form within the sea are the things that the ruling of extraction via sea diving, as you've worded it, applies to it, and it's considered as that. However, gold rings that are found in the sea, these are considered as treasure that you find. Excuse me. These are considered as things that you gained throughout the year. With that, inshallah, I will be concluding um, this session. Inshallah, I will be able to put in a little bit more time in the next few sessions to see if I could answer your questions. هذا والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. Next week's classes may be postponed. I'm not sure. Or the week after. You know, Layal al-Qadr. Inshallah, we'll keep you updated on the channel. Inshallah. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.